Near the end of the 40 BC year, in the port town of Brundisium, Marcus Antonius had negotiated a settlement of hostilities with Caesar Divi Filius at the signing of the Treaty of Brundisium, and had sealed the treaty with his agreement to marry Octavia Thurina, the sister of Caesar. Not long after the treaty was signed, Marcus Antonius had received an unexpected offer from one of Caesar's generals. Quintus Salvidianus Rufus was one among the friends closest to Gaius Octavius, who had travelled to Italy in support of the late dictator's newly named heir when the shocking news of Julius Caesar's assassination had reached Apollonia. When the Gallic general serving under Marcus Antonius, Quintus Fufius Calenus, had died, it was Salvidianus Rufus who then was sent to Gaul by Caesar Divi Filius and entrusted with taking possession of the 11 legions of the deceased Calenus. However, Salvidianus Rufus was completely ignorant of what had transpired in Brundisium. Not realizing that the legions had refused to fight, forcing Antonius and Caesar to settle their differences, Salvidianus Rufus had written to Marcus Antonius and had offered to defect from Caesar, with an accompanying promise to deliver to Antonius those 11 legions now under his command. In spite of the fact that Caesar Divi Filius had allegedly claimed the 11 legions on behalf of Antonius, and only to prevent them from falling into the hands of Sextus Pompeius, Salvidianus Rufus's son offered to turn those 11 legions over to their rightful commander, as an act of defection, brought into question Caesar's actual motives, suggesting his real intent may have been to steal them from Antonius. Yet, for reasons we do not fully understand, Marcus Antonius, who was now bound to Caesar by familial ties, did not accept the offer. Instead, he proved his loyalty to the newly signed treaty by informing his new brother-in-law of Salvidianus's treachery. Quintus Salvidianus Rufus was immediately charged with treason before the Senate, and though we do not know for certain whether it was by execution or by suicide, Salvidianus Rufus was dead by the end of the 40 BC year. Following the signing of the Treaty of Misenum in early 39 BC, which ended the proscriptions and formally recognized Sextus Pompeius's control of Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica and southern Greece, Marcus Antonius collected his new wife Octavia and her children from her first marriage for the journey to his home in Greece. Remaining in Athens in order to continue gathering the legions and financial resources necessary to launch his own invasion of Parthia, Marcus Antonius sent one of his generals, Publius Ventidius, to push back the Parthian invaders that had crossed Rome's eastern border under the joint commands of Prince Pacorus and Labienus Parthicus. Publius Ventidius was the general who had independently raised legions to help Marcus Antonius in 43 BC, at which time Antonius was busy laying siege to Decimus Brutus in the town of Mutina. It was to the camp of Publius Ventidius that Marcus Antonius had fled, barely escaping the Battle of Mutina with his life. Now, still in the service of Antonius, Ventidius set sail for Anatolia, choosing to pursue Labienus as he marched his legions northward through Cilicia and into Cappadocia, leaving Prince Pacorus to march into Judea. Because Labienus Parthicus focused his attention on the towns whose legions had supported Brutus and Cassius, whose people now suffered under the heavy taxation imposed by Triumvir Marcus Antonius as punishment, Parthicus was able to bolster his ranks with former Pompeian soldiers and enjoy a succession of victories. Although Labienus Parthicus succeeded in taking many of the towns in Anatolia, several cities within the region of Caria resisted him. After initially accepting garrisons of soldiers for Labienus, the towns of Milossa and Alabanda later turned on him, murdering the soldiers. The city of Stratonicia also refused to support Labienus and was besieged, but Labienus Parthicus was unable to take the town. While separated from his Parthian support, which had marched south under the command of Prince Pacorus, Parthicus was taken by surprise at the sudden arrival in Anatolia of Publius Ventidius. With only the forces he had levied locally, Labienus Parthicus felt at a disadvantage, having no confidence in the willingness of his men to fight a commander who had served under Julius Caesar. And so he withdrew, falling back to the Cilician gates. There he sent for reinforcements from Prince Pacorus, who had already invaded Judea. Prince Pacorus, hoping to help defeat Publius Ventidius, dispatched Caphyri and Cataphracts to Labienus, all commanded by one of his best generals, Pharnopates. When the Parthian support arrived to aid Labienus, they saw Ventidius's men camped on the rugged terrain of the surrounding slopes. Confident of an easy victory, and without awaiting the orders of Labienus Parthicus, the Parthian cavalry charged up the slopes, showering Ventidius's camp with arrows. But Ventidius had chosen his spot well, denying the Parthian cataphracts the wide open space necessary to lay hold of a victory. Ventidius's men withstood the assault by hiding behind their shields, and then launched a hailstorm of javelin attacks which proved efficacious in herding the Parthian cavalry into a tighter formation. Ventidius then commanded his heavy infantry to charge down the hill and attack the Parthian cavalry. With little room to maneuver, and unable to withstand the assault, the lightly armoured Parthian cavalry was no match for the heavily armoured infantry commanded by Ventidius. As archers and horses alike fell in the melee, the Parthians panicked. Turning, the cataphracts charged back down the hill, crashing into Labienus's men and scattering his army. Following his defeat at the Battle of the Cilician Gates, Labienus fled to a nearby town. Donning a disguise, Labienus planned to escape and to rendezvous with the Parthian cavalry, which had withdrawn to the Amanus Pass, connecting Cilicia to Syria. Sadly, Quintus Labienus Parthicus, the son of Titus Labienus, the general who had given his life so that his country might be free from tyranny, was captured and executed for high treason. When Publius Ventidius reached the narrow pass over Mount Amanus, he sent in one of his cavalry officers, Pompedius Silo, to claim the pass. But Pharnopates attacked, forcing Pompedius Silo to engage with the Parthian cavalry. Realizing that the battle's outcome looked to favor Pharnopates, Publius Ventidius ordered his heavy cavalry into the fight, turning the tide of the conflict. The Parthian cataphracts were soon defeated, and Pharnopates was slain during the battle. When Prince Pacorus learned of Publius Ventidius's victories at both the Cilician Gates and the Amanus Pass, he ordered a withdrawal from Roman Syria, systematically marching his forces back across the Euphrates River and into Parthian territory. Publius Ventidius did not hinder Pacorus's withdrawal, choosing instead to reclaim the Syrian territories which had been occupied by the Parthian forces. Nor did Publius Ventidius follow Prince Pacorus into Parthia, knowing that to do so would offend the triumvir Marcus Antonius, whose crown jewel was to completely conquer and subjugate the Parthian kingdom. Avoiding the Parthian border, Publius Ventidius thought to spend his military capital on punishing those who had rebelled against Marcus Antonius with willing support of Pacorus and Labienus Parthicus. Marching to Commagene, on the border of Cappadocia, Ventidius besieged the town of Samosata, where King Antiochus I resided. Antiochus attempted to negotiate with Publius Ventidius, offering an indemnity of 1,000 talents in damages in exchange for his continued rule of Commagene. Publius Ventidius, however, refused to negotiate with Antiochus, informing the king that if he wanted a peace treaty, he would be obliged to approach the triumvir Marcus Antonius. When he arrived in Commagene, the triumvir Marcus Antonius took over command of the siege of Samosata, ordering Publius Ventidius back to Rome. Although Marcus Antonius was far less effective than Publius Ventidius had been, peace was finally reached with King Antiochus, who ultimately paid a mere 300 talents in damages and fines to Marcus Antonius. Back in Rome, likely owing to the authority of Marcus Antonius, Publius Ventidius was granted a triumph for his victory at the Cilician Gates and the Amanus Pass, making him the first Roman to celebrate a triumph against Parthia, and the first to exact retribution from Parthia for the death of Marcus Licinius Crassus at the Battle of Carrhae, almost 15 years earlier.